we never knew him as he is, the thousandth part of his glory and perfection and blessedness never entered into our hearts. The apostle tells us, 1 John 3:2, that we know not what we ourselves shall be, what we shall find ourselves in the issue, much less will it enter into our hearts to conceive what God is, and what we shall find him to be. Consider either him who is to be known, or the way whereby we know him, and this will farther appear. 1. We know so little of God because it is God who is thus to be known. That is, he who hath described himself to us very much by this, that we cannot know him. What else doth he intend where he calls himself invisible, incomprehensible, and the like? That is, he whom we do not, cannot know as he is. And our further progress consists more in knowing what he is not than what he is. Thus is he described to be immortal, infinite. That is, he is not, as we are, mortal, finite, and limited. Hence is that glorious description of him, 1 Timothy 6:16, who only hath immortality, dwelling in the light which no man can approach unto, whom no man hath seen, nor can see. His light is such as no creature can approach unto. He is not seen, not because he cannot be seen, but because we cannot bear the sight of him. The light of God, in whom is no darkness, forbids all access to him by any creature whatever. We who cannot behold the sun in its glory are too weak to bear the beams of infinite brightness. On this consideration, as was said, the wise man professeth himself a very beast and not to have the understanding of a man, Proverbs 30:2. That is, he knew nothing in comparison of God, so that he seemed to have lost all his understanding when once he came to the consideration of him, his work, and his ways. In this consideration, let our souls descend to some particulars. 1. For the being of God. We are so far from a knowledge of it, so as to be able to instruct one another therein by words and expressions of it, as that to frame any conceptions in our mind with such species and impressions of things as we receive the knowledge of all other things by, is to make an idol to ourselves, and so to worship a god of our own making, and not the God that made us. We may as well and as lawfully hew him out of wood or stone as form him a being in our minds suited to our apprehensions. The utmost of the best of our thoughts of the being of God is, that we can have no thoughts of it. Our knowledge of a being is but low when it mounts no higher but only to know that we know it not. 2. There be some things of God which he himself hath taught us to speak of, and to regulate our expressions of them. But when we have so done, we see not the things themselves, we know them not. To believe and admire is all that we attain to. We profess, as we are taught, that God is infinite, omnipotent, eternal, and we know what disputes and notions there are about omnipresence, immensity, infiniteness, and eternity. We have, I say, words and notions about these things, but as to the things themselves, what do we know? What do we comprehend of them? Can the mind of man do any more but swallow itself up in an infinite abyss, which is as nothing, give itself up to what it cannot conceive, much less express? Is not our understanding brutish in the contemplation of such things, and is as if it were not? Yea, the perfection of our understanding is, not to understand, and to rest there. They are but the back parts of eternity and infiniteness that we have a glimpse of. What shall I say of the Trinity, or the subsistence of distinct persons in the same individual essence? A mystery by many denied, because by none understood, a mystery whose every letter is mysterious. Who can declare the generation of the Son, the procession of the Spirit, or the difference of the one from the other? But I shall not further instance in particulars. That infinite and inconceivable distance that is between him and us keeps us in the dark as to any sight of his face or clear apprehension of his perfections. We know him rather by what he does than by what he is, by his doing us good than by his essential goodness. And how little a portion of him, as Job speaks, is hereby discovered. 2. We know little of God, because it is faith alone whereby here we know him. I shall not now discourse about the remaining impressions on the hearts of all men by nature that there is a God, nor what they may rationally be taught concerning that God from the works of his creation and providence, which they see and behold. It is confessedly, and that upon the woeful experience of all ages, so weak, low, dark, confused, that none ever on that account glorified God as they ought, but, notwithstanding all their knowledge of God, were indeed without God in the world. The chief and, upon the matter, almost only acquaintance we have with God, and his dispensations of himself, is by faith. He that cometh to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of them that diligently seek him. Heb. 11:6. Our knowledge of him and his rewarding, the bottom of our obedience, or coming to him, is believing. We walk by faith and not by sight, 2 Cor. 5:7. Dia pisteos ou dia edus, by faith, and so by faith as not to have any express idea, image, or species of that which we believe. Faith is all the argument we have of things not seen, Heb. 11:1. I might here insist upon the nature of it, and from all its concomitants and concernments manifest that we know but the back parts of what we know by faith only. As to its rise, it is built purely upon the testimony of him whom we have not seen. As the apostle speaks, how can ye love him whom ye have not seen? That is, whom you know not but by faith that he is. Faith receives all upon his testimony, whom it receives to be only on his own testimony. As to its nature, it is an assent upon testimony, not an evidence upon demonstration, and the object of it is, as was said before, above us. Hence our faith, as was formerly observed, is called a seeing darkly, as in a glass. All that we know this way, and all that we know of God we know this way, is but low and dark and obscure. But you will say, all this is true, but yet it is only so to them that know not God, perhaps as he is revealed in Jesus Christ. With them who do so it is otherwise. It is true, no man hath seen God at any time, but the only begotten Son he hath revealed him, John 1:18, and the Son of God is come and hath given us an understanding that we may know him that is true, 1 John 5:20. The illumination of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, shineth upon believers, 2 Corinthians 4:4. Yea, and God who commanded the light to shine out of darkness shines into their hearts to give them the knowledge of his glory in the face of his Son, verse 6. So that though we were darkness, yet we are now light in the Lord, Ephesians 5:8. And the apostle says, we all with open face behold the glory of the Lord, 2 Corinthians 3:18. And we are now so far from being in such darkness or at such a distance from God that our communion and fellowship is with the Father and with his Son, 1 John 1:3. The light of the gospel whereby now God is revealed is glorious. Not a star, but the sun in his beauty is risen upon us, and the veil is taken from our faces. So that though unbelievers, yea, and perhaps some weak believers, may be in some darkness, yet those of any growth or considerable attainments have a clear sight and view of the face of God in Jesus Christ. To which I answer, 1. The truth is, we all of us know enough of him to love him more than we do, to delight in him and serve him, believe him, obey him, put our trust in him above all that we have hitherto attained. Our darkness and weakness is no plea for our negligence and disobedience. Who is it that hath walked up to the knowledge that he hath had of the perfections, excellencies, and will of God? God's end in giving us any knowledge of himself here is that we may glorify him as God, that is, love him, serve him, believe and obey him, give him all the honor and glory that is due from poor sinful creatures to a sin-pardoning God and Creator. We must all acknowledge that we were never thoroughly transformed into the image of that knowledge which we have had. And had we used our talents well, we might have been trusted with more. 2. Comparatively, that knowledge which we have of God by the revelation